Is this the right time to get started? Or is there usually that one person who you can, when they come, then you can start Bible study? Yeah. Let me know if that person is coming yet.
Who is that?
So, yeah, it is.
You can start now. They'll sneak in the back way.
They'll come around the back way.
Yeah, true. We get that. Yeah, we get that.
Good. So I saw Bibles are there. The Bible studies are there. Everyone's got their coffee. And shall we get started? Hey, good morning. My name is Don Deberstein, and I'm about a 22-year Wells pastor. And I thought, before we got started with the Bible study, I look a little shifty, so I thought I'd just explain to you who I am, and so you guys can be calm down. Let's see. Here's my family that just moved up with me. And so I've got the two daughters, and my son is the one that's holding the cat. He works on a dairy farm in Minnesota right now because he's a junior at Martin Luther College, studying to be a teacher. And so that's his fiancee, Sarah Markwart, whose father is a missionary over in India, and I think he was here not too long ago for a presentation too. So amazing how things like that happen, right? And then there's my son Levi. He is an 8th grader, and my wife of going on 25 years this year. So there's our family that just moved up here to Wisconsin after being gone for almost 23 years away. So here's just, when you see some of these, it kind of tells you, oh, he's a local boy. All those different areas, yep, there it is. So I did. And then after I left seminary in 1995, I went to Topeka, Kansas. Did you know the word Topeka means potato? I just thought you should know that. And then went to Port Orange, Florida in the year 2000. So so in other words, I moved away and I went to more mission settings, and only for the last 125 days have I been the Wells Director of Discipleship. When people ask me who I am, I still have to say I'm a parish pastor. Really, that's what it is. I'm just, 22 years of parish pastor. I know more about that than I do that very last line. So here it is. So here's where my dad was also a Lutheran pastor. So, here are some of the churches that I grew up in. That one, and then St. Paul's in Algoma, Wisconsin, these historic churches, Then he went to Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary, so when I was in 7th grade, I started growing up on that campus too, and then that was my home church, and I student assisted there, and then my vicar year, these huge Wells congregations of like 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 members. I don't remember it that way, but I just thought that this was my view of my church, of my synod, was through that. And then I went to that. And I began, and I'm so thankful for that. It was salt of the earth people that took pity on this young pastor coming on out, and yet they had such a high respect for the call and for ministry. Just a beautiful group of people who put up with me. And then after that, then that's when we moved to Florida. Yeah, so yeah, in the year 2004, that was when I got broke into Florida, where we had 3 hurricanes that hit within 6 weeks. 3 hurricanes. And with the hurricane, the shutters are all up, the power is out, you're in the dark, and then the first one is kind of like almost you see it coming. It's almost like this excitement, and then after the first one, all bets are off. You just get, you're tired of the heat, and you got shingles that are off your roof, and then so they start coming up with that. Or this, after the 3rd hurricane, then this is the one that came up. So it actually was an absolutely beautiful place to be able to live. Let's see. You see where Daytona Beach is on the Atlantic side, halfway down. See, Pastor Jim Huebner's son, Phil Huebner, if you know him. Yep. So he was in Palm Coast. Our congregation that got started in the Daytona Beach area was actually found in Port Orange. Oops, let me go back. And then, Pastor Phil Hebner was my closest neighbor just to the north. So he and we did about 9 years of ministry together, and that was so much fun. Our kind of philosophy of ministry and where we were heading, using the opportunities God gave us to our community, was just so much fun being able to work with him. And then I think it's so ironic. Then he moved back to Wisconsin, and here I am, 18 months after him, and here I am too. Yeah, Port Orange. Man, you look at that and you're like, that's where people want to go on vacation. So Daytona Beach area, 9 million visitors every single year that they would get. And you drive down the road, license plates from all over the country coming there. This coming week, they have what they call the first week of March is where the Harley-Davidson riders come. So 450,000 Harley-Davidson riders, they come down during that week. And then, of course, they just had the Daytona 500. My house was 4 miles away from the International Speedway. So when they came around the third turn is when I could step out on my porch and hear the roar of the engines, And then 50 miles to the south of us, that's where the Kennedy Space Center was. And so the shuttles or the Atlas rockets that go up, you know where to position yourself, and then you'd see the rockets that are going up in the distance. And then if you wait about 5 minutes, then you would feel the shock waves that would come all the way from 50 miles away. So just an absolutely, sun-kissed kind of a culture that people love to come to. Not all of it is good. We live next to Ponce Inlet, about 4 miles away. It was the shark bite capital of the world. More shark bites there than even the Great Barrier Reefs in Australia. And it's because there's an inlet where all the water rushes into, and so that's where the bait fish are, and that's where the sharks are. And what happens is the surfers go where this rushing water is. It creates bigger waves. And so surfers, part of the culture is they got like little anklets, little metal anklets that they wear down there. And so they're paddling like this. They're kicking and splashing the water. And the anklets that they kind of shine, and the shark thinks, ooh, bait fish, and goes after it, latches onto your ankle, and within a millisecond realizes, wait a minute, you're not bait fish. You're human. And will let go, because humans are they don't like the taste of you. But by then, the damage is done. You've got puncture wounds. You've got stitches. It's not that big of a deal. Except for that one. It just reminds you, this was from a member of mine who took it. He always did a walk on the beach, and then he would swim a quarter mile out into the ocean, turn around and swim a quarter mile back. Would you swim after seeing that after your swim in the ocean? Yeah. So here was, when I arrived in Daytona Beach, this was what they called a WEF unit. It was a glorified mission church, which is really a shoebox that is 3,100 square feet. And inside of it is where you do everything, your WEF, your worship, your education, and your fellowship. And so that was, when you're in a mission culture setting, and then finally you're able to have a house of God for yourself, that's an amazing moment, even if it is small. And then there was no space for Sunday school, so then we brought a double-wide trailer, and that's where we had our Sunday school, our vacation Bible school. We even started a preschool in that building. But we realized that's not going to be our future because, it's a double-wide trailer, and that's like dressing up a pig. So Our Savior's Lutheran Church, you can still see the original building right in the middle, and then we built onto the front, we built onto the back. And those are the blessings of being in a mission kind of a culture. And really driving it was that, Small Steps Academy. Like Pastor Hebner's son, there is a great need for Christian education in Florida. And being able, our community had such a need. That's what we really began to harness that up. And so we started a preschool in the year 2004. And then 10 years later, God continued to bless it, but we continue to add on based upon the needs of the community. So that's what really drove our ministry, is what do the people of our community need, and how can we meet it? And of course, there's such a strength in our congregations, in our church body for Christian education. We have such a history for that. That's exactly what we were harnessing up. So we did that in 2017, and of course, what was interesting is I noticed over the course of almost 18 years later is all the different types of people who are moving to Florida. You see the kid on the far left, and he's got the blue wrap. That's an Indian religion, the Sikh religion, in which hair is like a manifestation of God himself, and so you don't cut your hair. And so this boy has never had his hair cut in his life, and so it's just wrapped up inside that special turban. And then this kid in the middle, he was from Puerto Rico. The second row, she's right below me. She was adopted from Guatemala. And then the very top row, the boy that I'm pointing up to, you can see like a side profile of him. His mother was from Israel. And so you're getting this diversity of ethnicity from all over the world. And that was another interesting part of the culture, and yet they still wanted the Christian environment that we had to offer. I only put that's JJ. If you look real carefully on the right side, you see like a little black blur, and that's because about a month before he had brain surgery in which he had to cut all the way around his head. And I always remember being there with the family. You know, when you've got like a 3-year-old who's just had major brain surgery. The thing about JJ, I'm always going to remember is even though I encouraged the family, they never pulled through on having him baptized. And so I put JJ up there as a reminder that the work is never done. Even having a Christian culture and inviting and encouraging the parents, you still pray for little kids like JJ, and that God would continue to meet his needs. But that's what it was, making a connect with families within the community. And all of those people that you see there are not members of the church. And so in that outreach culture, everything was driven by how do we share the gospel with as many people as possible. That even applied to our staff. And so we had a staff of about 25 in our preschool. And in a mission congregation, you just don't even have enough hands on deck to be able to staff an entire preschool. And so we had to hire from the community. And what we didn't realize, what a great outreach opportunity that it would turn into. And so around that table, even as the preschool shares Christ with children, there are staff in here who are hearing the message of Christ along with the children. And so it would lead to baptisms of their children, or the sharing of the gospel and adult baptisms. There are 3 different women around that table who months later, they themselves would be baptized too. So just the opportunities that God gives and where he wants to take it, it's amazing. Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary came down, and I'll never forget this day because it was the first time that the seminary sang alongside of preschoolers. And I told you ever heard of a guy named Tifo? Okay, is he a member here? Yes. Really? Tifo, okay, he's not here though, right? So we can talk about him. Professor Tifo was there, and I remember calling him up and telling him, I say, what do you think about the seminary choir singing with the preschoolers? There was silence on the other end of the line. And finally, I said, it'll just be like now the light has gone away. And then, all right. So then he came down, and then they had a little practice with it. I always remember him saying, Dummerstein, for 35 years I've been honing the reputation that I don't like kids. And then he came out afterwards, and if you could have seen the look on his face, if you look at the kids, this was right when all the kids had come on up. Tifo's off to the side because all the kids, they're just kind of, they got that wild look in their eyes, right? So But then afterwards, after they sang, and then they always had that choir table with all the CDs that were CDs being sold. And I said, Professor, look around that table right now. And there's like 12 people around it, and they're buying CDs. And I said, not a single one of them are members of my church. Unchurched families whose kids heard the gospel in song, they're buying seminary CDs. It was the most incredible sight that I've ever seen. And just, I almost wish Tifa was here. He could tell you all about it. That's the land. Wisconsin and Florida, same size landmass, right? But that's a land of 20 million people. And this is a land of 5.5 million people. Put them together, that's almost 26 million people that Jesus says, come follow me. That's what we're going to be doing. If you go to Luke chapter 9, Luke chapter 9 is a little bit about Jesus' call to follow him. And if you just, we're not going to be reading the whole chapter, but if you go through, just look at the headings for it, and it kind of gives you a context of what we're going to be looking at for the next 4 Sundays. So it starts with Jesus sends out his 12. He empowers them. He gives them authority, not just to proclaim the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, but also to drive out demons, to heal in his name. And so he's on his last kind of journey. This is now the 3rd time. So he's knows that this is the last time, the last training session he's going to have in mind, sharing the gospel with those 12. Then Jesus feeds the 5,000. He performs a miracle. And whenever Jesus performs miracles, it's to give proof positive, I am who I say I am. It validates the message of the gospel. Then he turns to his disciples and says, hey guys, who do people say that I am? It leads to this beautiful confession of faith from Peter, right? Who says, you are the Christ. You're the Christ. And it's interesting, right after that, then Jesus launches into a discourse on, okay, if you say I'm the Christ, here's what it's going to cost you. We're going to be looking at those words a little bit later. And if anyone would come after me, we'll look at that later. Then it's followed by the transfiguration, right? And then after the transfiguration, there's a healing of a boy with an evil spirit. And the father comes up to Jesus and says, would you please heal my son? I went to your disciples and they couldn't do it. And it was, if you look at right after that section and you look at Jesus' reaction, it's like he gets an immediate ice cream headache. And it's almost like you could just see Jesus saying, I don't understand, how can I stay here this long and not be driven nuts? You hear Jesus, who's already, he's got the full scope of it, but he's still having to deal. It just shows you the patience of Jesus. Then after the healing of the evil spirit, Jesus gets another ice cream headache when an immediate argument breaks out among the disciples. Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And then after that, Jesus goes from that argument to saying, if you're going to follow me. So I just want you to get a full discourse of Luke chapter 9. There's the backdrop of it. Jesus knows what he's doing. And look at all of the distractions he has to face. And it has to do with those who are going or who desire to follow him. Okay, so there's the backdrop of that. We're going to, maybe here's what I do. Since you sat so conveniently in tables, would you go to the first 3, and around your tables, I want you to read through the verses that are on your sheet, and then I want you just to follow through on that very first question, okay? That very first question. I will give you, take about 1 minute. I'm not sure how you guys do Bible studies, but if you do it as a group and you want to read through it together, or just one person read, that's fine. And then I want you to rate, around your table, rate each of those volunteers who say, I'm going to follow Jesus. I'll give you 1 minute for each volunteer, and I'll give you like 30 seconds to read through. So you have 3.5 minutes. Ready? Go.
I will follow you. First, let me go back and say goodbye to my We assume. This person is.
Seconds.
I did 5. Well, there's 3 the same person. He doesn't.
10. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so around your tables, you had your choices. You had 5 choices for each of the volunteers who says, I'll follow you, Jesus. Did anyone circle 1? Raise your hand. We had one. Was it for a particular follower? For number 3, that was the one who said, I need to do some kisses back home. So rating number 1. Yeah, also?
Okay, we had a dispute at this table about number 2 that wanted to go home and bury his father. Now, they all think their father's dad are dying, and it's going to be just a little while, and then he's going to follow Jesus.
Oh, okay.
I think that these meant that he's going to wait till his father dies before he goes.
Did you hear what she? Did you just hear what she said? A lot of people think that was that number. Yeah, that was volunteer number 2, right?
That's 2.
So her point was volunteer number 2 doesn't necessarily mean that the dad died. Let me quick go home, and then I'll meet up with you in a couple days. But it could have been the guy's like, yeah, I'll follow you after my dad dies. And the dad is like 45 years old, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose. Okay. You know, I had heard that too. That could that be? I suppose.
We don't have any fathers.
Yeah. How many did anybody circle 2? Raise your hand.
I circled 2.
So we got some 2s. How many circle 3? Raise your hand. So we had a lot of 3s. Any 4s? For which one, might I ask?
Number 3.
That was number 3. Okay.
Just going on the same line.
All right. Did anybody circle number 5? And by the way, now for which ones? For number 5, which one?
I actually thought it was the one that Jesus replied about the dead burying their own dead, because I thought Jesus' words were talking about that he was coming from a family that was dead in their faith life.
Ah, okay.
He was actually leaving that life to follow Christ.
Yeah. That is interest. Or did anyone else putting down? Yes, sir.
Number 1.
For the first guy who says, I'll follow you.
Wherever you go.
Yeah, where?
For one thing, he volunteered. He's the only one to volunteer. Christ said, follow me on the rest of them. But he volunteered.
He volunteered.
That got him 5 on my
I can understand that. Yeah. Did you?
That was a 5. Number 1 was a 5 for me.
Number 1 was a 5.
Yeah. Give him a 5.
Isn't that something? So, in other words, none of you agree with each other.
We can safely say that. It's true.
Yeah.
Saying at this table, it's hard to determine the level of commitment because we don't get their final response.
We don't know what they said.
Yeah.
You know what they said after Jesus said these things to them. He made a comment, and we don't know the outcome.
So that's a very good. She said her point simply is, what don't we know about these guys? What happened, or what we do know is that Jesus knows what is going on in their hearts. Because when you match up, and that's going to be our next discussion group that you're going to have around your table, is why would Jesus say what he said to guys who, I looked at the volunteers and I thought to myself, that first one, I'd give them a thumbs up. I'd say, yeah, come follow me. Number 2, I would have expected Jesus to say, well, of course, go home and bury your father. You know, it almost sounds, you know, that's the compassionate Jesus is going to understand that, right? And who would not want to say, well, of course, go home and say goodbye. If you haven't had a chance to say goodbye to your family, well, of course.
They don't want them calling the FBI and going out looking for you.
Yeah, I don't know if there'd be background checks for following Jesus.
The first of the 12 didn't go home.
Yeah.
The first 2 or 3 or 4 of the 12, they just followed.
Yeah.
They never did go. Not at that time.
Look at when Jesus says to volunteer number 2 and volunteer number 3, and he says, come follow me. What one word appears in both of their answers? How does that word change our study on commitment, following Jesus?
That weakens the commitment right there, because first, I got something else that's more important.
Yeah.
I've already said this to you, Lord, that this is more important.
Which means then, come follow me. But first, which means the moment you say that, where does that place Jesus? Yeah. And I think that's the interesting part, where no matter how you rated them, I would probably have rated them the same, just because I'm looking at the externals. But Jesus, who sees their heart, and even you can pick it up in some of their language, but first tells you, is Jesus number one top priority or not? Ultimately, that's the question. So yeah, we're picking up something from their levels of commitment. Now turn the page, and why don't you take, take about 4 or 5 minutes and discuss each of the responses then that Jesus says to them. So now you have the 3 volunteers. They say they want to follow Jesus, and then he matches up these responses to each one of them. Okay, so go ahead, read the responses, and discuss it with your group. And let's see if we can do it in about 4 minutes. Go ahead. One minute.
We gotta get the dirt out. Yeah. This isn't a hard one. No one who puts his hand in the ball looks back. Just bit for certain. What's the rich man? Yeah. You're gonna disagree. be like that people that he got us to be.
This one here, when I was a teenager, caused me a lot of concern because I grew up on a farm, driving a tractor, pulling a plow, and the plow was always behind us.
Good point.
Say what?
It's a good point. You have to bring that one up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. So 3 would-be volunteers, each one of them, I do not doubt their sincerity when they say, "We will follow you." Did it strike you when you read their responses? You know, Jesus, if you really want to get followers, these are probably not the things to say to people if you want people to follow you. It almost sounds like he's pushing people away. But there's a point that Jesus is making, and we have to find out what that is. So the first guy, volunteer number 1, says, "Lord, I will follow you anywhere." Jesus says, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." And around your tables, what conclusion did you come to? Why did Jesus say that? Please.
Life will have its challenges, and it always won't be easy. That's been true.
So if I'll follow you anywhere, Lord. Well, if that's Daytona Beach on spring break, of course I'll follow you there. But if you're going to follow Jesus too, I'll follow you, Jesus, into cancer. I'll follow Jesus, you into a broken relationship.
Well, and I was taught that we were to remember that Jesus didn't have a home, and that's what this is what you're going to do. Your life is going to be, all the things that humans treasure or want to have in their life, a home, a family, the comforts and success. Don't even think about it. That's not going to happen.
Will you follow, Jesus says, will you follow me if to a place where that isn't home, because I don't have a home?
We're never going to have a home.
Yep.
We're going to find out where we're going to sleep when we get there.
Yep.
We're going to get food when we get it.
Because that's the American dream, so I heard.
Yeah, evidently.
So is following Jesus the dream life? Yeah.
Not here.
Yeah. How about volunteer number 2? Oh, but first, let me go back and bury my father. Jesus said, "Let the dead bury their own dead." It sounds very harsh. So, how'd you deal with it?
It sounds as though he does know that this man's family is spiritually dead, and so, let them bury your dead. You don't have to go back there if you are not spiritually dead. You should just stay with them.
Okay, so she mentioned this, and I'm glad you brought the point up, because obviously Jesus is not referring to let the physically dead bury their dead, because that just can't happen. So logically that doesn't work. But if you do put let the spiritually dead bury their dead, then what's the priority then that Jesus is emphasizing?
He shouldn't be spiritually dead if he's going to stay with them.
Yeah, because here are your choices. Either you follow me, or you're going to follow going back and you're going to be digging a grave. Or you follow me, and I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. So one of them has an answer that focuses on the gospel, and the priority is eternity, as opposed to just showing respect to someone and putting them into the ground. So, okay, so it sounds very harsh, but at the same time, Jesus is emphasizing the gospel and things that are eternal with that second answer. How about the third one then? The third one, first, let me go home. I'll say goodbye. I'll follow you.
I don't have a cell phone. Call them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. And then Jesus says, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. Someone here, did you say you grew up on a farm?
My grandparents built a farm.
Oh, they did too, okay.
Okay. And we used to spend a lot of time out there. And one of my grandfathers still plowed with horses because he loved horses. So if you're out on the plow, picture a little house on the prairie when he's out walking behind the plow, and the objective is to get a straight furrow so you can plant seed in. If you look back, you're not getting a straight furrow.
Right.
You're all over the field. So you've got to keep your eyes on the prize.
To keep this straight.
Keep it straight.
Yeah. How would you equate this then in 21st century language? Because kids today.
Yeah, good one. Good.
Yeah. Only one I could think of is try driving on I-94 looking in the rearview mirror.
You can't make a basket not looking at it.
Yeah. Mow a straight lawn with their lawnmower. Close your eyes and just see how off you get with that. So Jesus' point. So to the guy who says, and I don't doubt his sincerity, but when he goes, notice how every single one of the guys' commitment, the volunteers' commitment, always is follow. I will follow you after or if or when. It's always conditional.
But accept or any kind of think of all the any exclusions you can think of. Somebody thinks they're valid, and they're not.
Even though it's not like Jesus is saying, you're going to sacrifice, you're going to stay right here, buddy. You're not going to. I'm not allowing you to say goodbye. It just, if Jesus knows us human beings, so then the guy goes back and he starts saying goodbye. What do you think his mom's reaction is going to be? His wife's reaction? His dad's reaction. What? You're going to just give it all up and that's it? So is that, no, you got to be thinking about your family. And of course, the mom just breaks down and starts bawling, and the wife is mad. So all of that, it's what's the priority going to be? When you look at each answer, would you be able to, as far as wholeheartedness, be able to give them a 5 when it comes to their level of commitment? And there's the difference. If there was one single lesson that Jesus is teaching with discipleship here is there is half-hearted discipleship, and then there's wholehearted discipleship. So my question for you is, what in life shows are we half-hearted or are we wholehearted? When I was going through those volunteers, how many times do we minimize our following of Christ when you say, well, I'll follow Christ after tonight? There's either it's minimized or we put restrictions on it, or we justify by saying, oh, Lord, you understand the obligations that I have in life.
I totally understand where you're going and how that applies to us, but I think I have a little bit of trouble with the fact that God wants us as Christians to care for our families, to do, that is what he wants us to do.
Correct.
So I do understand your point, but I think there's a little confusion in that or something. I don't know what the right word is, because it's like saying that all of us just said, okay, all right, John, we're following you, we're going to follow Christ, we're not even going to go home, this is it. Okay, well, like, who's going to take care of my mother? Who's going to, well, no, I'm just going to follow Christ because that's full commitment.
Yep.
So is that, how do you talk about that?
That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
but I mean, there's things we have to do, so yeah.
sure.
What are we going to
Yeah, what are we going to do about
What are we
it?
going to do? Because these answers that Jesus gave these people are good answers, but how do they apply to somebody who's supposed to, if I were a 21-year-old and Jesus said to me, are you going to follow me? I go, yeah, I'm going to follow you.
Yeah.
I don't have a home, I don't have a husband, I don't have kids. Yeah, cool, yeah, I'm there. But now at my age, okay, then
Yeah.
how do we, and you said that, your question was, how do we know that our commitment is true?
It is, and I'm not saying that the only way to follow Jesus is to give the kind of commitment that he is looking for from their lives, their conditions. But if this is a spiritual issue, if this is an attitude of my heart, and that is what Jesus is bringing up.
He's really addressing what's in your heart. You can still believe God and care for your parents, but it's really
There it
Not
is.
just, would you only do 1 or 2 hours in church on Sunday, but what is your good life?
Because otherwise there are so many times that I'll take the obligations that I have in life and they actually start getting in the way. They can become impediments to my discipleship, my following of Jesus. Well, sorry, Lord. I just, we'll talk about that in the next section, understanding the cost, the application of it. Go to that number 3 when it says, as the time approached for Jesus to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. How does that sentence reshape the context of a discipleship discussion? What's the impact? Yeah.
The word resolutely, that's what's at issue here.
Yeah. Does Jesus, like volunteer number 1 who says, I'll follow you anywhere, but he wasn't, and look at Jesus, I'm going to Jerusalem, and what's waiting for him? The cross is looming large, and he's still going to follow that path. That talks about that, is that half-hearted or wholehearted commitment to you and to me? So Jesus is exemplifying everything about discipleship on yours and my behalf, and he's teaching it to you and to me. Yeah. Any questions on that? That was the first. Yeah, Cindy.
For me, it's coming together in that it's part of what she had said. It's not part of this. That everything in my life, my vocation, my family, all those things, I am a disciple of Christ 24/7, and I don't set it aside for some of the societal choices that are sometimes even idiotic, but I'm all in. I am a disciple of Christ 24/7. That is my part of commitment.
What commandment then does discipleship? What is it's connected to discipleship? What commandment? It's a first commandment issue. Yep. Jesus says, I am top priority. That's it. Follow me. First commandment. Now apply that to each and every one of your lives, filled with obligations and getting pulled in different directions. Yeah. Yes.
It's like a tension here because we have the going back to saying by my family. How do we reconcile that with the words, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church?
Yeah.
You think that would include, please say, how do you resolve that tension?
Yeah. And I don't think that Jesus, and for us, I think you would understand that is how we think it. I don't think that Jesus is saying family is bad, marriages are bad. All the obligations that we have in life, they are all good things unless they begin to become obstacles in our discipleship of following him. Jesus says, then we're going to be looking at where Jesus says, there's father and mother, it's not about family. It's wholehearted following of me. Yeah.
He also goes on, we often forget this. He says, the guy goes, let the dead bury the dead, but remember, you still have to proclaim the kingdom.
Yeah.
So go. You don't want to follow me, fine, but you still have to proclaim the kingdom.
Which is spiritual.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think as a parent, you need to follow that as well. And one of the greatest things I tell my children is that I want you to tell me that you love me, but when my kids say, Mom, I love you, but I love Jesus more, that's the greatest compliment that they can give me. Because that's the priority. That's what I want in their hearts. That's what I want to hear, that I love you, but I love Jesus more. Good days, bad days, that's the goal.
That is. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Yes.
Well, there is that one passage that talks about how singles can serve God better because they have that more time and they can focus versus people that are married have their attention split between their family and themselves.
Yeah.
There's wiggle room.
Yeah, the Apostle Paul totally agrees with you. He says, if you don't get married, you save yourself a whole lot of misery. Yeah, that's 1 Corinthians chapter 7. I paraphrased him, but yeah. Good. Go on to the next section where it says, understand the cost. Illustration A, Jesus invites you to go camping with him. You think either tent, cabin, or Holiday Inn. How many, which one are you checking right now? It's because you could call them all camping, right? I'm following Jesus and I'm camping. But we all have different levels, yeah. What about those bugs?
Under the stars?
Under the stars, yeah. Illustration B, a young man with long unkempt hair and baggy pants takes time out from playing Call of Duty with his friends. He tells the recruiting sergeant that he wants to join the army and will go anywhere the army will send him. You're the drill sergeant. Respond. What are you going to say to this guy? I am going to join the army.
Get a haircut and shine your shoes.
Yeah, get him. Does a guy know the cost of going in the army? So there's one. There goes a hair. What else? No more video games? Yes, sir.
You damn well better commit or else you ain't coming with us whatsoever. You gotta get rid of the hair, you gotta get rid of the games, you gotta join this army, and you have to commit. If you can't, out the door you go.
There it is. That's a level of commitment right there. Get rid of the baggy pants, crisp uniform, the hair. Can you follow commands, follow directions? And instead of video games, now you may have to be in warfare. You're going to be pushing buttons that may release bombs and missiles. Will you be able to kill? The level of commitment that is necessary for that. Do you think this guy really got that level? It's a whole new, just an illustration of the kind of commitment Jesus is asking for us of life. Then go to number 1. Is following Jesus a once-for-all commitment, an ongoing process, or both? Turn to, just real quick, Matthew chapter 4, 18 to 22. Matthew 4, 18 to 22. Jesus said, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and they followed him. And then going on from there, he saw 2 other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and the other brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father, and they followed him. So there you're back to the commitment. Is that what? So what's the question is that like a once for all commitment or an ongoing process or both? After you read that. Following Christ. Please.
John arguing about sitting by Jesus' side in heaven. So it's both, because yes, they made that commitment right away, but then they're human, so they're going to waver.
When, if I may ask to pry a little bit into your personal life, when did you start following Jesus?
Well, you can say my baptism, but that wasn't my decision, that was my parents' decision. And then it's ongoing. Every time you're here, you listen about the stories of at confirmation, you're making another commitment. It's daily, right? Every day you wake up saying, okay, today's the day I'm going to follow you, and then 3 minutes later
Yeah, there you go. And I like she mentioned baptism, right? So that's when that was a commitment actually that God the Father made for us through His Son and the waters and the Word, and then our parents continue to raise us. Or when you look at the following, the discipleship, isn't it amazing that it's less about us and more about grace? It's more about God. Otherwise, would we be following Him today? I don't know. I don't think so. Discipleship just reflects the grace of God, that ongoing, thankful process. The more you focus on grace, the more motivated one becomes to follow. Not that it's not going to face its challenges. I just think sometimes the more you I wonder when you start the days that you just have a really bad following Jesus day. I wonder if sometimes we elevate that in our minds only because we're more cognizant of it now. Our awareness of what it means to follow Jesus, we're aware of it, so we're more conscious of when we do fall. And that's a good thing. So that discipleship means then we can draw strength, repentance, forgiveness, and then wake up the next day and say, you know what, I got a brand new day. Guilt is gone. I am forgiven. Tomorrow is a brand new day. Number one, I start over. My discipleship begins. Here it is. Get out of bed. Thank you for mentioning that. That discipleship is that daily walking and learning. Yep. Ongoing process all the time. How about number two? What in your life proves that while following Jesus is important, it's not the most important thing in life? We don't have to spend too much time on that, but that will be a gut check for you. Because what interferes with our discipleship, our daily, weekly following of Jesus in life? I'm not sure. You could put, it could be rest. I worship St. Mattress. It could be my career. It could be my family. How does commitment to Christ affect our use of our time, our money, and our ability? Maybe now it's how does a commitment show itself? How do we spend our time? Yeah.
Well, I think, there's a lot of people that you work with, could even be family members, friends, who don't go to church. Like I have to say to a lot of my friends, oh, I'm not available on Sunday until after 10. Oh, what are you doing? You sleeping? No, I have church and Bible study. Oh, they've even started to realize, like, oh, when you're done church Sunday, then would you like to do this? Yeah, but you can go to church too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's how you use your time. That's what I was getting at, is it makes my life different because I'm a disciple of God.
Yeah, exactly. Setting aside that, and is that a half-hearted commitment to setting aside this morning? Were you half-heartedly here? As opposed, so whether it's time or money, is it accompanied with that half-hearted attitude or a wholehearted, thank you, Lord?
I was just thinking in general, it's those fruits of faith.
We
do all those things because we want to.
Yeah, discipleship shows itself. She mentioned about fruits of faith and how it shows.
And sometimes changes in your life can affect this too. When you're working, you have money to spend. Now that I'm retired and on a budget, I have more time than money, so I do more volunteering. So
she says she has time and money for everybody for spring break.
Yeah.
So
Get that bikini on. Yeah.
Let's see. We're at 10 o'clock. I think when I get together with you the next time, I'm going to be setting aside a little time. I have a new position called Director of Discipleship that has been pretty much dormant for the better part of a decade. And there's some things that I'd like to talk with you. And I think here's going to be the first one. I got different categories. So I'd like to talk about small group Bible studies. I'd like to talk about family. I want to talk about your families, and discipleship with them. I'm also interested in youth. And what are the resources, what are the ministries and activities that we have with the youth as well? And there's a couple other areas that I want to be able to talk about. I think another one that I'm curious is volunteerism within the church. and what kind of shape that's going to take. So I'm hoping to get, you're the first Wisconsin group that I'm meeting with on about this, and I'd like so if I can use you kind of like a little pilot, you know, and I want to bounce some things off of you and say, are we going in the right direction? Are we sniffing? You may be able to give so I'm looking for your feedback. Sound good?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, very good. So we'll do that for next time that we get together. We're going to be talking about if you're going to follow Jesus, what does it mean when he says you got to lose yourself? So we're going to talk about that for next time. Sound good? Yeah. Fold our hands, so let's end in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the word that you have given to us. We thank you for reminding us of what it truly means, the cost of following you. And then we look at you, Lord, and we see the great cost behind which you invite us to follow you, because what we are following you is going to take us to something that is absolutely incredible, and it's waiting in heaven for all of us. So be with us. Bless our Lenten discipleship discussion. And until we meet together, may God be with us. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you.
See you next Sunday.
I heard your name. I thought maybe you grew up in Lake Geneva.